I still remember the chill in the room when she walked in, his ex, Melissa. The ceremony had just begun. My fingers clutched the bouquet tighter as whispers rippled through the guests. She stood there in a soft pink dress, tears streaking her makeup, mumbling something about unfinished love. He didn't tell her to leave. He didn't defend me. He just looked confused. Then, as if trying to avoid conflict, he turned to me and muttered, "This is your fault." My throat closed. I waited for him to retract it. He didn't. That was the moment everything inside me shattered. Not because she crashed my wedding, but because he blamed me for it. I didn't cry. I smiled for the cameras, finished the ceremony like nothing happened, and collapsed later that night. My heart didn't just break. It folded in on itself. But fate doesn't forget the women it watches suffer in silence. Because when I opened my eyes again, I was standing a year in the past. And this time, I was done begging. The first thing I did was cancel the wedding venue. Quietly. No drama. I used my early bird refund to enroll in a private legal workshop. Contracts, asset protection, quiet exit strategies. I smiled at him the same way I used to, but I wasn't listening anymore. Every lie, every "don't worry about Melissa" was now data. I no longer questioned his behavior. I documented it. When Melissa texted me one afternoon with a fake apology, I responded kindly. Let her think I was still weak. I wasn't. I was watching both of them build their castle of deceit. And this time, I planned to let them, just so I could own the land it stood on by the end. He had a talent for playing the victim. Anytime someone questioned Melissa's presence, he'd shrug and say, "She's like family." When I voiced concern, I became the insecure fiancé. So this time, I didn't voice anything. I let him spiral deeper into comfort. I encouraged his closeness with her, even dropped her name in conversation. "You should invite Melissa to the fundraiser," I'd say. He'd light up, thinking I was growing more trusting. No, darling, I was growing smarter. Every choice he made was another piece of the noose they didn't even know they were tying together. Meanwhile, I started building. I created a dummy shell company under a different name. Legally clean, but personally mine. Through it, I began acquiring tiny equity shares in the firms he depended on. Silent positions. Power without presence. I even befriended one of Melissa's coworkers through a networking event, using a false name. Over coffee, she shared everything: Melissa's insecurities, their on-again, off-again story, and how Melissa still swore I stole him. It was pathetic, but valuable. Every detail they handed over freely would be weaponized later, not with fire, but with precision. My mornings were spent at the gym. My nights at the laptop. I read everything I once ignored: business contracts, financial loopholes, emotional manipulation studies. I wasn't healing. I was arming myself. My therapist noticed the change. "You're not angry," she said. "You're surgical." I smiled. There's no rage left, just strategy. Because I had spent a whole lifetime being emotional. This time, I was going to be effective. Let them play their petty game. I was building the checkmate move, one page at a time. When he brought up wedding planning again, I nodded along. "Whatever makes you happy," I said sweetly. He mistook submission for agreement. Again, he talked about venues and color palettes, and I just watched him bury himself in illusions. Melissa started texting more frequently, now confident enough to send me selfies of her with him. "He's such a great guy, isn't he?" she wrote once. I replied, "You deserve him." That wasn't sarcasm. It was strategy, because in a few months, I'd make sure she got exactly what she wanted, and then she'd choke on it. I started storing proof: screenshots, voice recordings, anything I could legally archive. A friend in IT helped me secure encrypted backups. I had everything cataloged, every backhanded remark, every gaslight. I knew this wouldn't just end in heartbreak again. It would end in collapse, but not public. I didn't want spectacle. I wanted silence. Because the best revenge isn't viral. It's total control. And when you do it right, they don't even know you've won until they're standing in ruins, wondering how the floor gave out beneath them. I began planting seeds. I dropped small suggestions to his investors, subtle questions about transparency, concern about overinvolvement with personal relationships, harmless phrases like, just hope personal ties don't cloud financial judgment. It didn't raise alarms. It raised eyebrows. That's all I needed. From there, doubt does the rest. While he played house with Melissa behind my back, I was rearranging the furniture of his future. Brick by brick, deal by deal, reputation by reputation. All while smiling and asking, how's work, love? I used their predictability against them. Melissa would always overstep. He would always defend her. And I would always be the woman in the background, silent, watching. That's what made it easy. One night, she sent a message meant for him to me by mistake. It was a voice note. Once the wedding is done, she's irrelevant. I played it twice, saved it, replied, you dropped this. She didn't respond. But the next time I saw her, she smiled wider. Fake kindness. That's the thing about women like her. They always underestimate women, like me, until they see what we really came to do. The day I received full approval on my company trademark, I treated myself to dinner. Alone. No dress up, no date. Just me, a glass of wine, and quiet satisfaction. I wasn't celebrating revenge. I was honoring my own return. The girl who once asked, why doesn't he choose me, had evolved into a woman who whispered, let him, because letting him go was never the loss. Keeping him would have been. And this time, I wasn't losing. I was strategically leaving and taking everything with me. When I did, the beauty of watching liars is that they always think they're winning. He bragged to me about a new investor he landed, unaware that I already had quiet ties to that investor's daughter. It's solid, he said proudly. They love me. I smiled. I'm sure they do. Meanwhile, Melissa sent me a wedding dress suggestion via DM. Just a thought. You should look soft and elegant. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I already knew what I'd wear when this all ended. Steel and strategy. Let them obsess over appearances. I was busy finalizing the terms that would put their whole future in my hands. He started slipping missed details, bad calls, paranoia. You've changed, he said to me one night. You're so calm. I sipped my tea. Growth will do that. He looked worried. Good. I let him stew in that confusion while I filed quiet paperwork behind his back, changing shared accounts, redirecting ownership of joint assets to private holdings in my name. Not illegal. Not suspicious. Just prepared. And when Melissa called during dinner one night, and he stepped out to take it, I didn't follow. I opened my laptop and signed another acquisition contract. One more piece of his kingdom, now mine. Melissa couldn't resist provoking me. She always mistook access for power. He tells me everything, she said once, even about your insecurities. I smiled, responding with, that must be exhausting, carrying his secrets while pretending you're the prize. She didn't reply, but her silence said everything. Because women like her feed on superiority, and I had stopped playing inferior. I let her think she was winning, that she'd successfully edged me out. She had no idea she was walking into the very space I was leaving, with the gold still in my hands and the keys already in my pocket. My quiet business grew. Word of mouth spread, partnerships stacked, and all under a separate identity. One his circle would never recognize until it was too late. When he casually mentioned needing legal counsel for a side venture, I recommended someone I'd trained myself. A mole, a friend, a woman with sharper teeth than anyone he'd ever met. That's how you take down a king. You don't storm the castle. You get hired as his planner. And when the roof caves in, you're already walking out with the deeds in hand. There were moments I almost softened. Almost. Like when he brought home flowers and said, I want this wedding to be right. My old self would have cried. But now, I just arranged the bouquet, kissed his cheek, and whispered, it will be, because it would be, just not for him. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate still requires emotional rent. I was past that. What I felt now was cleaner. Conclusion. I was nearing the final move. All I had to do was let him play himself into checkmate. I received an invitation from a mutual friend, an elite networking dinner. I knew Melissa would be there. She showed up in red, dripping diamonds, clearly trying to spark whispers. You made it, she said, voice sugary. Of course, I replied. I don't miss events where the future is being shaped. She blinked, momentarily confused. That's when the host arrived and introduced me as the keynote speaker. Her face fell. She'd dressed for attention. I'd shown up with authority. And that's the difference between the heroine they write in and the woman who rewrites the ending. After the event, he messaged me, surprised I hadn't mentioned it. Why didn't you tell me you were speaking? I answered, you never asked. That's the game he played, feigning inclusion, but only when it made him look good. He wanted a quiet wife with loud loyalty. But I was neither quiet nor loyal to a man who couldn't hold my name with respect. And by the time he realized I was slipping away, I had already moved the exit closer. The only thing left was timing. I met with my legal team, women I trusted, trained, and backed. You're ready, one said. Everything's airtight. When you walk, he gets nothing. I nodded. Let's set the date. Not for a wedding. For the announcement. I wouldn't just leave. I'd detach with precision, leaving behind no ties, no gaps, no room for manipulation. That's the real rebirth. Not fleeing in pain, but walking away so thoroughly, they don't even realize they've been left until their hands grasp at nothing. That week, I sat through a wedding planner meeting and nodded along. He discussed floral themes and song choices, unaware I had already transferred ownership of the house we were meant to share. I had no intention of showing up to the altar. He thought he was planning a marriage. I was planning an exit headline. And when Melissa sent another smug message, bet you're nervous about the big day, I replied, not at all. Everything's falling into place. And it was. Just not how she thought. Because I wasn't going to lose him this time. I was going to let him go. And make sure they both realized what they'd never get again. I started staging the withdrawal. I returned keys he hadn't asked for, canceled deliveries, removed my name from social utilities, all under the excuse of wedding stress. He nodded, distracted, barely paying attention. Melissa had grown bolder, more possessive, even showing up at restaurants where we were dining. Coincidence, she claimed, but I saw the glint in her eyes. She thought she was winning. She thought I was cracking. She had no idea I was peeling myself off their map entirely. Let her think I was backing down. I was simply pulling back far enough to watch the collapse clearly. He began showing signs of confusion. You've been so distant lately, he said one morning, as I packed for a wellness retreat. I kissed his forehead. Just tired. But don't worry, I'll be back better. He believed it. That's the danger of entitlement. They never believe you'll really leave until the echo of your footsteps is the only thing they have left. And by then, it's too late. I left the city not for peace, but for paperwork. I signed the final clause that would legally detach my holdings from his reach. He thought I was resting. I was unplugging him. Melissa, emboldened by his growing absence of attention toward me, messaged again. He talks about you less lately, she wrote. Guess you finally faded. I laughed softly. You'll know what fading feels like soon enough. I didn't bother sending it. Some lessons aren't worth explaining. I already knew the ending, and it wasn't hers. Let her bask in false security. Let her parade through moments I was already abandoning. She was clinging to the ashes of what I burned without a sound, and she wouldn't realize it until she stood in the smoke alone. He tried planning a final pre-wedding getaway, something romantic. I agreed. Packed light. Wore white. Let him hold my hand and talk about our future. I watched him, not with longing, but with detachment. I was saying goodbye to a performance I'd mastered. The woman he thought he knew? She'd been dead for a long time. This was just the funeral. No eulogy. No tears. Just a quiet ending to a script I no longer wanted a role in. And when he kissed my forehead that night, I whispered, "Thank you." He thought it was for the moment. It was for the lesson. During our final dinner, he spoke about legacy. "I want our life to mean something," he said. "A family. A business we can build together." I nodded. "It will mean something. Just maybe not what you think." He laughed, unaware that while he dreamed aloud, I had already closed our joint accounts. While he toasted to us, I had already donated my wedding dress. And while he planned a future, I had purchased my freedom. I wasn't just leaving him. I was leaving the version of me that tolerated being blamed for someone else's chaos. The media team I'd hired released the first quiet PR campaign, a series of anonymous interviews featuring women who walked away from toxic engagements. No names, just stories. But people whispered. Some recognized the tone, the timing, my voice. It didn't matter. It wasn't about gossip. It was about narrative. For once, I was controlling the story, not as a scorned woman, but as a strategist, a survivor, the kind of woman they'd try to copy, only to find out I'd already moved on to the next chapter. I returned home a week before the wedding. Calm, ready. The house was quiet. He greeted me with warmth. I responded with distance wrapped in affection. Let him think we were good. Let him think we were on track. I had my final checklist: withdraw my investment in his startup, transfer real estate rights, schedule the formal announcement. The only thing left to do was watch him take Melissa's bait fully. And he did. 2 days before the wedding, he met her in a hotel. I had pictures, video, audio, all collected legally, all ready to be used. The morning of the wedding, I left early. I left a note, short, elegant, final. "Thank you for showing me who you are. I'll no longer pretend to be who you need." And I was gone. No drama, no confrontation. By the time the guests arrived, I was halfway across the country. And the venue staff had strict orders: no ceremony today. Instead, a press release hit social media. Businesswoman terminates engagement citing irreconcilable values and ethical conflict. No names, just impact. But anyone who read between the lines knew. He called, dozens of times. I never answered. Melissa went public on day 2, claiming they were always meant to be. The comments were brutal. The public didn't buy it. My silence became power. Every hour they tried to explain themselves, my narrative solidified, the quiet woman who walked away and never looked back. And while they scrambled for sympathy, I was already in meetings with people who once wouldn't even return my emails, now offering me board seats and investment opportunities. Not because of the scandal, because of how I handled it, because I didn't need to destroy them. I just had to let them destroy each other. And that's exactly what they did. While I quietly rose above the wreckage, with every single thing they thought I'd lose. The fallout was worse than they expected. The venue posted a tasteful message: the event has been respectfully canceled by the bride. No more details, just silence. But silence speaks loudest when paired with timing. Sponsors pulled out from his startup. 2 board members resigned. One had been following my quiet build for months and immediately requested a meeting. "We've been watching," she said. "You've turned reputation into leverage." I nodded, calm, because I hadn't built my future on noise. I built it on preparation. And while they chased attention, I'd secured everything they thought they'd inherit. Melissa attempted her redemption arc online. Long captions, forced tears. She said, "I never meant to hurt anyone." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. The world doesn't respect women who sabotage other women and then beg for sympathy. She'd exposed herself, no help required. Every fake apology only made me look stronger. And her desperation? It wasn't love. It was the realization that without me, there was no longer anything to compete for. The man she clung to had become a man no one envied. He texted me the 5th day after the collapse. You've ruined everything. I stared at it and whispered, no, I just revealed it. Because I hadn't exposed them. I'd simply stepped aside, long enough for the truth to become obvious. That's the brilliance of quiet exits. When the dust settles, you're already gone, and they're still spinning in circles trying to figure out who lit the match. He begged for a meeting. I declined. He wanted closure. I had already closed every door. I was invited to speak at a leadership forum. Topic: strategic exits. The irony wasn't lost on me. I walked onto the stage in a midnight blue suit, no notes, no apology in my voice. Sometimes we waste time trying to build with people who blame us for their failures. But when you step away, you see clearly they weren't partners. They were anchors. The room fell silent, and I knew then and there I wasn't just successful. I was unshakable, because I hadn't healed by accident. I'd chosen to evolve. One of my former bridesmaids called to say she was proud of me. She had once begged me to forgive him after the wedding drama, saying, "He didn't mean it." "Now, you were right to walk," she said. "You were just early." That's what rebirth feels like. Not vengeance, but clarity arriving too soon for others to see it. I didn't gloat. I just said, thanks. Because some apologies don't come in words. They come in alignment. When the people who once doubted you now follow your lead. I returned to the city 6 weeks later, not in hiding, but in command. My face was on the cover of a business journal. The headline: "She didn't walk away, she walked ahead." People whispered, but no one approached unless invited. That's the power of dignity. You don't have to shout to be heard. I visited my old apartment to collect the last of my things. He wasn't home. I left the keys on the table, and a sticky note that simply read, "You were right. I wasn't the one. I was the only one." No contact since. My new apartment overlooked the skyline. Quiet, modern, serene. I designed it myself. Every inch a reflection of the woman I'd become. No shared closet. No guest toothbrush. Just space that breathed with clarity. I bought a dog. I started painting again. I built mornings with rituals, not reactions. I filled silence with music, not memories. That's the thing about truly leaving. You don't just cut them out. You fill the gaps they left with things that belong only to you. A journalist tried to bait me into commenting on his latest downfall. Care to offer a statement on your former fiancé's legal trouble? I smiled. I have no comment on people who are no longer part of my story. They printed it, as is. Cold, they said. But they didn't understand. It wasn't cold. It was clean. I didn't deny the past. I just didn't live there anymore. And when you've already outlived your trauma, talking about it becomes unnecessary. I had moved on so far, they couldn't even see me anymore. Melissa disappeared from social media. He faded into professional obscurity. Their friends turned distant. And me? I expanded. Quietly, elegantly, strategically. I didn't rebuild out of revenge. I rebuilt out of intention, because my worth was never tied to their approval. It was tied to my decision to stop asking for space and start claiming it. And every time I showed up now, in boardrooms and conversations, in my own mirror, I saw not the girl he blamed, but the woman who let him blame her one last time. And then never again. Because they thought I was weak when I left. They didn't know I'd already started taking everything when I did. I was asked to mentor a rising founder, a woman in her 20s, sharp-eyed but self-doubting. "What if they don't take me seriously?" she asked. I smiled. "Then stop asking them to." Her eyes widened. That's the truth no one tells us. We wait for permission that never comes. But I didn't wait anymore. I built the kind of authority that doesn't knock. It enters. She followed my lead, and within 6 months, launched a startup that stunned our industry. Watching her rise reminded me, my story wasn't rare. It was just hidden. Until I made sure it couldn't be ignored. An event planner once told me, "You're intimidating." I said, "I'm intentional." She apologized. I didn't need her to. That's the switch. When you stop shrinking from how others perceive your strength and start using it. The room I walk into now no longer feels like a battlefield. It feels like mine. Not because I conquered it, but because I arrived already whole. When you stop performing for the crowd, you stop needing their applause. And I hadn't clapped for their approval in a very long time. One afternoon, I stumbled across an old voicemail from him I had never deleted. "I wish you'd stop making me look like the bad guy," it said. I listened once, then deleted it. Because that's the thing about villains. They write their own stories where they're misunderstood. But I wasn't writing that book anymore. I was living a new chapter. One where the plot twist was not in what happened to me, but in how I walked away. That's what haunts them. When they realize they were never part of your future. Just a footnote in your origin. I invested in a wellness company that centered healing after emotional betrayal. The founder asked why I cared. Because the strongest women I know almost didn't survive silence. We built it differently. No performative positivity, no shame. Just real tools for real recovery. The waiting list hit 10,000 in the first month. Not because we marketed well, but because we understood pain. And more importantly, we knew how to alchemize it into purpose. My betrayal wasn't a scar. It was a map. And now, others were following it to find their own way out. He sent one last message. "You win." I didn't reply. Not because I needed him to hurt, but because I needed nothing. That's when you know you've healed, when their regret doesn't light anything inside you. No satisfaction. No closure. Just stillness. Winning isn't about revenge. It's about no longer recognizing the battlefield. He hadn't lost me. He'd lost access to the version of me who ever wanted him. And that woman, she was gone. The one who replaced her didn't care to look back. An award arrived in the mail. Businesswoman of the Year. I hadn't even known I was nominated. I read the card. For redefining what resilience looks like. I laughed. Because resilience wasn't my goal. Reinvention was. The world thought I bounced back. No, I rebuilt forward. Not as a survivor, but as a designer. Of my peace. Of my identity. Of my own damn life. I wasn't just the woman who got away. I was the one they'd never see coming again. I hosted a retreat, just 10 women, all with stories like mine. I didn't talk much. I listened, and I saw it, the shift, when they realized they weren't weak for having stayed, or left, or loved the wrong person. They were just early versions of who they were becoming. And I told them, one day, you'll look back and be proud of the woman who broke because she was the one who decided to build something better. That's what rebirth is. Not a comeback, a conscious redesign. I walked past our old wedding venue one day. It was hosting another couple. Lights, laughter, music. I paused, not out of sadness, but out of distance. That day had once marked the end of my innocence. Now, it felt like a rite of passage. Because if I hadn't been humiliated, I wouldn't have been awakened. Pain didn't kill me. It introduced me to myself. And I liked this version of me far better than the one who once waited in white for a man who was never going to choose her fully. I started signing letters with just my initials. Not because I was hiding, but because I didn't need a full name to be recognized. People knew the voice, the energy, the standard. That's the legacy I built. Not fame, but reliability. I became the woman other women whispered about in rooms that once excluded them. If she did it, maybe I can too. And I hope they do. Because I didn't rise to stand alone. I rose to hold the door open for anyone still stuck behind their own betrayal. They used to think I was too soft, too forgiving, too passive. But soft things survive. Soft things bend. And soft things, when focused, shatter stone. A small digital magazine ran a retrospective called Weddings That Never Happened. My name was on the list, but not in shame. The article called me the woman who left before the vows and rewrote every rule after. I smiled reading it. I wasn't embarrassed. I was memorialized, not as a bride abandoned, but as a woman who saw the storm coming and built a boat instead of waiting for rescue. I didn't drown. I sailed past them. And now, I didn't fear the past. I wore it like armor polished by distance. My calendar filled with new partnerships, authors, founders, advocates, all women who once believed they had to prove they were worthy of love, space, trust. We didn't talk about men. We talked about missions, about funding and frameworks and future-proofing our worth. These were not women waiting to be chosen. These were women who chose themselves. That's what I built, not just a business, but a movement. The kind that didn't need slogans, just results. The kind that didn't need permission, just presence. I visited my grandmother's grave one weekend. She used to say, "The strongest women I know never raise their voices, they just raise the standard." I stood there quietly and whispered, "I finally understand." Because I had. I didn't fight loud. I didn't post screenshots. I didn't drag names. I simply walked away, took what they thought was theirs, and built it better. That's how you win without theatrics. That's how you make sure they never confuse silence with surrender again. I bought a small bookstore in the same neighborhood where he once left me waiting for 2 hours on our anniversary. I didn't do it to spite him. I did it because I wanted to plant something where disappointment once lived. I named it Chapter 2. Inside, there's a shelf titled For Her. It holds books about women who transformed, who rose, who made being forgotten look like a setup for their spotlight. And every time I walk past that shelf, I nod to myself. Because I'm not just the woman who survived betrayal. I'm the woman who turned it into literature. He was photographed recently, alone, older, sharper lines in his face. A friend sent me the image. I didn't feel anything. Not pity, not satisfaction, just nothing. That's when I knew the wound had closed completely. Because real healing isn't about watching them lose. It's about not watching at all. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's indifference. And I'd reached it. I'd transcended the version of me who once asked, "Why wasn't I enough?" Now I whispered, "You were never even a question." A young girl DM'd me on my birthday. "I saw your story. I just left someone who made me feel small for years. Thank you for proving it's possible to start over." I cried, because that's the real reward, not headlines or funding or accolades. It's knowing you made just one woman feel less alone, that she chose to save herself because you showed her it could be done. I didn't want to be admired. I wanted to be useful. And now I was at a private retreat. Someone asked, "If you could speak to your old self, the one at the altar, what would you say?" I thought for a moment, then answered, "Leave sooner, cry less, and never mistake survival for love." The room fell quiet, but I didn't. I'd made peace with the fact that healing doesn't erase the bruise. It just makes sure you never get hit in the same spot twice. And I no longer flinched, because I had outgrown the blows. I went to the ocean alone on the 1-year anniversary of the day I was supposed to marry him. I didn't take photos. I didn't write a journal. I just stood in the tide, barefoot, arms open, letting go not of him, but of the fear that I wouldn't find peace without him. And when I exhaled, I felt it. The moment my soul stopped referencing him. Not a scar, not a thought, just space. Clean, whole, mine. People still ask, "Do you believe in love?" I do, but not the love I used to chase. I believe in the kind that doesn't cost you your voice, the kind that doesn't ask you to dim, the kind that claps when you rise. And if I find it, beautiful. If I don't, still beautiful. Because I already married someone far more important, myself. And that commitment, that one can't be broken. So when they say I lost everything the day I left, I smile, because I didn't lose. I walked away with everything worth keeping. And the one thing they'll never take again is me.